Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. How does a quarterback prepare for a start, especially if it's his first start of the season? How does a quarterback prepare for an upcoming opponent and for being thrown under center? Well, he'll watch film. He'll stay after practice and try and develop chemistry with his receivers, getting the timing down on routes. He'll ask questions to the coaching staff about anything he's unsure of and go over plays in the playbook that he's comfortable with and plays that he's not. He'll take notes of how the defense typically lines up and if there are any tells that indicate what coverage the other team will be running. You get the idea. I'd say that 99.9% of the time, this is how a quarterback prepares for a game. But in 1971, one player went the extra mile. Because in 1971, Chicago Bears quarterback Bobby Douglas, in preparation for his first start of the season, moved in with his head coach. He decided to live with his coach so that the two would never be apart, so he could absorb all the knowledge necessary. And the crazy part? This actually worked. And this is the story behind what might just be the strangest quarterback preparation in NFL history. Before I talk about how Bobby Douglas prepared for this game and how well he played, we need some context to understand who Douglas is in the first place, and why he was getting the start. In 1968, the Chicago Bears were atrocious at the quarterback position, to the point where a healthy Gale Sayers was single-handedly carrying that offense. Whether it was Jack Concannon, Virgil Carter, or Larry Rakestraw under center, nothing was working for the Bears. Their quarterbacks combined to throw 10 touchdowns and 21 picks, with the 10 touchdowns ranking second to last in the NFL, only ahead of the Atlanta Falcons. Chicago only threw for 1,681 yards that season across the 14 games, for an average of just 120 yards per game. That ranked dead last in football. Knowing that they had a giant hole at the quarterback position, it made sense that in the 1969 NFL Draft, they decided to address that by taking Kansas quarterback Bobby Douglas in the second round. As for how Douglas would look, yeah, it wasn't great. While there were some good things that happened over those first two seasons, it was mostly bad things. Even that's being generous, because just about the only good thing from those first 2 years was a start against the Buffalo Bills on November 22, 1970, when he had a broken wrist and somehow threw 4 touchdown passes while being named NFC Offensive Player of the Week and guiding his team to a 31-13 victory. If you want to learn more about that heroic performance, then click the card in the upper right corner. Other than that, it was rough. As a rookie, Douglas started 7 games. The team went 1-6. He held onto the ball for way too long. During the first season, he threw 148 passes and got sacked 37 times, getting sacked 20% of the time the Bears called a passing play. For some perspective, remember the 2002 season where Houston Texans quarterback David Carr was role-playing as a crash test dummy? He got sacked 14.6% of the time. Carr was sacked 76 times that season, and yet would have needed to be sacked 89 times to match Douglas's percentage. It was that bad. In one game against the Packers, he went 5 for 13 with 26 yards passing, no touchdowns, 2 picks, and a passer rating of 7.1, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. But it gets worse than that, because in that game, he took 4 sacks for 24 yards, meaning that while he was in that game, the Bears had 2 net passing yards, which is obviously terrible. In entering the 1971 season, after what happened over the previous 2 years, it was abundantly clear that Bobby Douglas was not going to be seeing the field anytime soon. To start off the 1971 season, Douglas was third on the team's depth chart. Leading the quarterback competition was Jack Concannon, who started the majority of the games for the Bears in 1970 and wasn't terrible, as he was tied for 6th in touchdown passes with 16. Considering the fact that Concannon had just 19 touchdowns over his first 6 seasons in the NFL combined, this 1970 campaign was easily the best of his career. And backing him up was Kent Nix, who only threw 1 pass for Chicago in 1970, but was best known for being Pittsburgh's starting quarterback for the majority of the 1967 season. It was pretty clear that Douglas was not in the plans of head coach Jim Dooley, and it was going to take something remarkable for Douglas to be playing any meaningful football in 1971. And early on, things were looking good for Chicago. This was a team that hadn't had a winning record since 1967, and hadn't played postseason football since 1963. But after 2 games, they were putting themselves in a solid position, as they won games while Douglas sat on the bench. In Week 1, they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 17-15, with Kent Nix coming off the bench to throw the game-winning touchdown pass to George Farmer in the 4th quarter. Then, they stunned the Minnesota Vikings, winning 20-17 after trailing 17-3 entering the 4th quarter. Once again, Kent Nix came off the bench, this time because Concannon was injured, and he threw 2 touchdown passes, with both of them going to Dick Gordon. However, things would go south in Week 3, when the Bears lost to the Los Angeles Rams by a final score of 17-3. They had no fourth quarter magic left and no fourth quarter heroics in them. But most importantly, in the second quarter, Concannon tore some knee ligaments, meaning that the Bears were now without their starting quarterback. That would be the last time he played all season, as that injury, unsurprisingly, ended his 1971 season after just 3 games. It would also be the last time he ever donned the Bears uniform in a regular season game. Still, even despite losing their starting quarterback, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of panic setting in for the Bears. Kent Nix led 2 fourth quarter comebacks already. He had starting experience, and he was playing better than Concannon at this point of the season. Dooley said quite bluntly, "There's no reason Nix can't start." Douglas was moving up the depth chart, but he wasn't going to be starting. And 2 weeks later, everything changed. Nix did his job in his first start of the season against the New Orleans Saints, going 15 for 27 with 242 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 95, as the Bears won the game convincingly, taking it 35-14 and leading it 35-7 at the half. He actually set a career high this game for passer rating in the start, and the 35 points that the Bears scored in the first half were the most points the team scored under Dooley in the first half, and the most first half points scored by the team since September 29, 1963, when they scored 35 in a 37-21 victory over the Detroit Lions. Everything was looking good. The Bears were 3-1, Nix was running the offense, and it was smooth sailing. And then, the ship hit an iceberg. The Bears lost 13-0 to the San Francisco 49ers, and even worse, Nix suffered a wrist sprain. The top 2 quarterbacks on the Bears were now both out, and were going to miss an extended period of time. Chicago had no other options. They even went as far as considering putting defensive back Gary Lyle at the position, since he played some quarterback in college, even though that was over half a decade ago. Bobby Douglas was going to be getting an opportunity to redeem himself. He was now going to be Chicago's starting quarterback, and Dooley was confident in his abilities, saying that he was going to do the job. But obviously, no one expects the third-string quarterback to be thrust into the starting spot. This was a lot of information for Douglas to process, and he didn't have a whole lot of time to do it. So what did Dooley decide to do to get Douglas ready for his new starting role? He moved in with him. Yes, Jim Dooley decided to live with Bobby Douglas, enter his bachelor apartment, and help prepare him for the game that way. He bought a projector and set up base. As Dooley said on Douglas, "I want him to think like I think. We're gonna live, die, and think together." I don't know why Dooley said he was gonna die next to Douglas, but regardless, the 2 men were now living together, and even got dinner together at one point with Sid Luckman. Dooley said, "If the quarterback and you don't think alike, something is wrong." And I think it's safe to say that Dooley may have taken that a little bit too literally. So that raises the question, did this crazy plan of his actually work? Amazingly enough, it did. October 24th, 1971. We're at Tiger Stadium for this NFC Central matchup between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions. This is an absolutely monumental game for both teams. The battle for the NFC Central is a dogfight, with the Vikings at 4-1, the Lions at 4-1, and the Bears at 3-2. With only 14 games in the season back then, the last thing the Bears wanted to be was 2 back of the wild card and 2 back of the division lead near the midway point. Especially since they'd be riding with their third-string quarterback for the foreseeable future, the last thing they wanted to do was dig themselves into a deep hole. And the Lions, who led the entire NFL with 150 points scored, wanted to keep their momentum going and possibly take the lead in the division. Now, before we go any further, I have to say that if you recognize the date of this game and you recognize this matchup, odds are it's not for the main subject of our story. Unfortunately, one of the biggest tragedies in the history of the NFL occurred at this game. This was the infamous game where with 1 minute left, Lions wide receiver Chuck Hughes collapsed on the field. Just a few minutes before, he caught a pass, and now he was lying on the ground. After he was rushed to the hospital at 5:34 p.m., he was pronounced dead at just 28 years old. In the over 100-year history of the NFL, with the tens of thousands of games played, this is the only game where a player died. While this isn't the main point of the video, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. However, as this game pertains to Bobby Douglas, the third stringer, who a few weeks ago had no shot at seeing the field, was now the starting quarterback who was living with his head coach. By all accounts, this strategy seems ridiculous, but it actually worked. Douglas went 15 for 21, throwing for 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, and a passer rating of 125.1. He only took 1 sack this game, which is kind of remarkable when you consider his history in that department. And with the Bears trailing 23-21 in the fourth quarter, Douglas scored the game-winning rushing touchdown from 1 yard out to give the Bears a 28-23 victory. To put this game into perspective and to address how good this game was for Douglas, consider this. It was the first time in his career he ever threw multiple touchdowns in a game without throwing an interception. His completion percentage of over 71% was the highest of his career at that point. His passer rating of 125.1 was the highest of his career at that point as well. It was the first time Douglas ever won a road game in his career, and the 5 yards lost on sacks were the fewest he's ever lost in a start in that department at that point. It seemed like Douglas had all the momentum in his world on his side. Unfortunately, that would not last. While Douglas had a shockingly great game against the Detroit Lions, he would completely falter down the stretch. In one 3-game stretch where the Bears lost to the Lions, Dolphins, and Broncos, Douglas completed less than 27% of his passes, while throwing no touchdowns and 9 interceptions, taking 18 sacks, and posting a passer rating of 0.0. The Bears scored just 9 points across those 3 games on 3 field goals, and any chance they had at making the postseason was completely gone after that. You could make the argument that Douglas had the worst 3-game stretch of any quarterback in NFL history, and I wouldn't argue too much with that, especially since in one of those games, he had negative 20 net passing yards. Douglas would stay in Chicago until 1974, putting up some poor numbers as the team's primary starting quarterback over the next 2 seasons. Much like Dooley, new head coach Abe Gibran did not have a whole lot of success with Douglas under center. Eventually, Douglas would bounce around the league with the Chargers and the Saints before ending his career in 1978 as a member of the Green Bay Packers. While you have to wonder how well Douglas would look in today's NFL, since he was a scrambler and not your prototypical pocket passer, and since no offenses in the early 70s were really designed for quarterbacks like him, he definitely did not get the job done when he was on the field. Still, perhaps the best moment of his career, and perhaps the best game of his career, came under some of the most unusual circumstances ever. One week, you're riding the bench, not expecting to get a single patch of dirt on your jersey for the rest of the season. A few days later, not only are you taking the snaps, and not only are you having the game of your life, and not only are you winning, but you're doing it with a completely unexpected roommate. I don't think we're going to be seeing Urban Meyer living with Trevor Lawrence this season, or Kyle Shanahan living with Trey Lance. But back in 1971, that insane living arrangement actually happened. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Monday and Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who help get the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.